Siamak Paulson, and welcome to this episode of my podcast. In this episode, I have my special guest, Chris Hatton. He's joining me from Perth today in Australia, West Australia, but he's traveled from the US all the way to Australia to do some work and attend a conference, which we will be talking about those anyway. Welcome to this episode of the podcast, Chris.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Happy to have you. Like any of the other episodes of my podcast, Chris, I want to start with your career. Basically, the question is, where did you start as an engineer, and how did you end up in tailings management and in tailings engineering?
I've got, I guess, sort of a unique background. I actually grew up in the business. So my grandfather was a geotechnical engineer at the Bureau of Reclamation. And then my father went to school for engineering and started in geotechnical engineering as well. So it's sort of the family business, if you will. Some folks are bakers and that sort of thing, and our family business is geotechnical engineers. So I grew up in the business. I actually started working as a technician in high school, and I spent my summers doing that, and then going into university. Worked part-time, put myself through school as an engineering technician as well, taking on progressively more. So I had a background in laboratory testing and then in field testing and construction. So for the aggregate, I've actually been in the business proper my whole life, but 47 years actually working in it. Sorry, that math is wrong, but 44 years. But as a professional out of university, it's been 37 years. I went to Colorado State University. Actually went there on a chasing basketball. I wanted to be an engineer as well. That was I wasn't sure which discipline I wanted to go in. I focused on civil, just because that was sort of where the family went, and walked on at basketball at CSU and figured out that I was going to be a better engineer than I was a basketball player. So I redirected there and, did my undergraduate, went straight through and got my master's. And that was in the mid 80s, and the market was really bad and job prospects were very poor. So I decided to stay on for a master's, and I did my thesis on collapsing soils, looking at constitutive theory and controlling matrix section and collapse mechanisms for remolded soils. So I thought it was something I'd never use, and I actually use it quite extensively, which is quite the irony. But I started with a company called Woodward Clyde Consultants in 1988 as a staff engineer. We were then bought by URS, and then subsequently with AECOM. And I rode that through 2015, and then I left AECOM and started the Denver office for a geotechnical firm called Haley and Aldrich. Outstanding foundations firm, one of the best, if not the best, in the eastern U.S. Excellent company. They were getting into the mining industry, and they gave me an opportunity to start an office and focus on mining. And we started that office from ground zero. I mean, it was Post-it notes and big pens and paper pads, and we started at ground zero, but grew the office, and it was a smaller firm, 800 folks, and I realized that I needed a bigger firm, so I left in late 2020 and joined Golder, and then subsequently we were purchased by WSP, and that's brought me to where I'm at. And I'm quite content. I really like the company. It's got a large footprint and resources, but it's got a very nice culture, both in the U.S. and here in Perth as well. I'm out here now for review boards. Part of my time is spent on internal reviews and then external review boards, and I'm on a review board for Rio Tinto iron ore, and I've been up in the Pilbara. So I'll be here for the next couple weeks, and then I'm giving a keynote lecture and teaching a short course at the end of July, and then I'll head back to the States. But I love Australia. You guys have a beautiful country. The people are just fantastic, and this is a really good time of year for me to be around here because I don't tolerate the heat very well.
Yeah.
Yeah, the majority of my career has been in tailing. I was hired on by Woodward Clyde, and it was sort of a passing comment in the hallway. Hey, you got time to help out with a tailing dam? And that was day one, and I haven't looked back. It's been most of my work's been primarily tailing. I had the opportunity to serve as engineer of record, design, and serve as engineer of record for multiple tailing facilities, and had the opportunity to start with a group of people that started Freeport's tailing stewardship program in 2003, and that was obviously before GISTM and before a lot of the stewardship was out there. And so we basically built that thing from the ground up until I was in that group up until about 2016, 2017. So, but it was that really defined my career. That opportunity with Freeport really brought me into what tailing is, what the problems are that we have, and with that joined with URS and AECOM, has really put me in, sort of guided my path, and then yeah, so
Right.
and so now I serve on a couple review boards, 5 or 6 review boards, and that takes up a good part of my time. Those are booked out actually 2 years in advance.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing engineer of record work. I've decided to push that down to the younger engineers and let them take that off, and then I moved to the side and serve as a director, and I'm helping out with quite a few projects in the company in a directorial mode, and helping. A lot of what I do is help engineer records develop. I've done it my whole career. I've done a lot of teaching, training of operators, tailing dam operators, that are out there actually building the dams. And so I enjoy interacting with the young engineers and guiding them and that sort of thing. And I think it's important. We need engineer records significantly. It's a significant demand. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's a great topic, Chris. If I may, I might just ask you a question about this particular topic, the engineer of record EOR.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a very common topic in Australia and elsewhere, I think, and the introduction of GISTM. I think that's what we want to hear more and more about. If you want to tell us more about this engineer of record, maybe for some of our listeners, just say what that means really, and then where do you think, in terms of how it's been evolving in the past few years, because you've been doing it for many years, and how do you think the younger engineers or people that you actually mentor at the moment, how do you think they are sort of taking on that role?
So the engineer record really comes out of North America, and the concept comes out of actually more structural engineering. This idea that you have an engineer of record that's in responsible charge. That came out in the concept actually came out in, oh gosh, I need my notes in front of me, but in the 70s or maybe a bit earlier. There were a couple catastrophic failures. There was a structural failure at the, I believe it was a Hyatt in Kansas City that killed a bunch of people, and it really sort of formalized the concept that there really needs to be a lead engineer and somebody who's in responsible charge for these projects. And the issue is just making sure that things are being done properly. And you get in some of the failures that we've seen have had ethical issues and sort of dilution of the value of the engineer and that sort of thing. So coming after that, we see regulations in the U.S. where they are licensing engineers. They're defining what responsible charge is, and so the engineer record is pretty well defined in GISTM. I think the nice thing about GISTM is that it really put governance in the forefront, and they really put meat around what the responsibility of an engineer of record is. And so, I guess in loose terms, you've got a person that's responsible for, in this case, a tailing facility that is supported by a company that is also proficient and can provide the resources. The reality of engineer of record is one person can't do it. It's not for and a lot of people won't like this, but it's not for smaller companies. It's a process of development. It's a way of working. Um, in the U.S., we had in North America, Canadians both had the concept pretty well defined, or we had a pretty good framework around it before Mount Poly failed, and that was really the catalyst for the engineer of record. You had multiple sort of engineers that were responsible for different parts of the dam, and they were coming and going, and there was really nobody that was looking at the big picture, not only looking at what was happening day to day or how all the pieces and parts tie together, but looking to the horizon and saying to the owner, hey, this is the direction that we need to go. This is our vision. And it's really important that we move in this direction. And if you make these decisions, this is how it's going to adversely affect you now, and it's how it's going to adversely affect you into the future. So, I think all of us in the industry really view the engineer of record as an esteemed position, but there's a significant amount of responsibility that goes around that. After GISTM came out, there was a group of us that got together with the Canadian Dam Association and United States USSD. It's United States Dams Group. And we put together, there were 8 of us, 4 Canadians, 4 US, 4 people from consulting, 4 people from industry, Scott Martins, Amanda Adams, Kenyambo Katapa, Christina Winkler, Michelle Julian, and I'm forgetting. Oh my goodness. This is why I shouldn't say names. There's one more that I am just drawing a blank on. Oh, Andy Small. And he does the majority of the work. So him and Amanda, and then we added Theo Gertsen from Australia. So we now have 9. But our charter is really initially was to put some meat and training around the engineer of record. What does it take to be an engineer of record? Most people think of the technical skills that you have to have, preferably a civil engineering background, that sort of thing. But there's also a large part of it is interpersonal skills, what we call soft skills or emotional IQ. It's the ability to interact with people. Some people think an engineer of record comes in and they bang the table and you're going to do it my way and that sort of thing, and that's not how it works. We are collectively in a client service business, and we're in support of mining. And if mining goes away, we're out of a job. So we've got to figure out how to build these structures in a way that they're safely built and operated and closed, and we have to do it in a very difficult environment. When you build water dams, typically they can choose idealized sites. At a mine, typically it's had a pretty tortuous geologic history in the area, so the sites aren't great for building dams and large structures. And to put something in that's in a good location is far away, the economics just don't work. So you're balancing sort of the economics with the site conditions. So geotechnical engineers deal with a myriad of issues. Engineer records deal with a myriad of issues. Geotechnical engineering being one of them, obviously figuring out how to safely store tailing, but there's also a significant environmental aspect. There's hydrotechnical aspects, and I mean surface water hydrology, hydrogeology, engineering geology, and then socioeconomic, the environmental and social aspects of it too are very, very important with finding that balance. And then you go into closure and you've got post-closure land use, and how do you turn this thing into preferably an inert landform and be able to say it's been safely put away. So the engineer record has to cover a very broad spectrum of skills, and it's just one person can't do it. It's just not possible. Those people don't exist. So it's a team of people, and it's the ability to go in there and work in a team environment with an owner that is, typically has financial constraints and has budgets that they're working against, and find a solution and keep them moving in the right direction. And so that's sort of an overview of the engineer record. We've seen attrition in engineering, significant attrition, starting in the 1990s. We lost a lot of people to the dot-coms, Lotus and Microsoft and all that. They came in and they raided all of our, at least the consulting companies, and were offering salaries that were twice what we were paying. And so we saw a lot of attrition there. The markets were down, commodity markets were down, mining was down. And so we saw a lot of people vacate out of there. There were some controversial things that went on with mining, and people were moving away from it. And so we see that bubble right now, and that bubble is actually working its way through. So the value positions that, are out there are people in their 50s and 60s years old. They're just, that we don't have them. They don't exist. And so that bubble, and then sort of a shadow to it, are kind of working their ways through the business. GISTM really placed a value on that position and those people. And what we're trying to do is get people trained up. And the concern that I have is that it gets commoditized, and that would be really not a good thing. It's not a commodity business. It's, like I said, it's an esteemed position. It's a position of great responsibility, and it takes, you never stop learning. You're going to be growing and growing, and you just don't step into these very large projects. You've got to incrementally develop yourself. The other part of tailing is that there isn't a university right now that produces a tailing engineer. It just doesn't exist. So we take civil engineers, we spend 10 years at least training them and working them into the process to understand what's going on. And then as you go down that path, you start to develop. And so things like the conference here at the end of July are really important, because it's an opportunity for us to get together as a group, as an industry, in a very collaborative environment. It's an opportunity to present our papers and what we're learning and that sort of thing, to do short courses. I'm doing a short course on terms of reference for the engineer record. And so that's an important part of it. But I can't stress enough, for if a younger person is hearing this, to really look at it as a career, because it's a fabulous career. It's, many of us, most of us, travel the world. We get to see interesting places that we would never normally go to. You go to Australia, maybe go to Adelaide or Perth or Sydney or Melbourne or whatever. Well, we're going up to the Pilbara. We're going up to, I work at Olympic Dam, so we get to go up there and in Central Australia and see things that, some people have never seen. Not most people don't go out looking for.
Yep.
And that goes with, U.S. and Canada and South America, and getting into the Atacama and all that. It's really cool. It's a neat career, and compensation's good, and it's a good lifestyle. It takes care of it, but we need people. We really are needing people.
Exactly. I mean, that has been the challenge, and I think at least what we see here in Australia is, like, post-COVID, like countries like Australia, who actually heavily rely on the immigration. Basically, we've lost that sort of flux coming for a few years, and it's very hard to find good quality engineers, and trying to train them, mentor them. That's also a challenge. Do you see
I was going to say,
things?
what we see is the other thing that's happened, at least in the universities, is we see a big push for engineers to take on social sciences, and it's just not in the amount of information that we need to learn as engineers, it's diluting the education process. And it make no bones about it. It's a hard job. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of energy and thought and brain power and that sort of thing. And it's not for the faint at heart, but it's highly rewarding. But we see, kids coming out of school, and they're just not as robust and well developed as we've seen in the past. So there's certainly some deficiencies. So as they come into the, consulting tends to be the training ground for new engineers, just by virtue of the fact of how they interact with industry. And so there's a lot of training that goes on in that first 10 years of developing all these different skills and refining them.
Sure. So just again, touching on that conference that you're going to be here in Brisbane, Mine Waste and Tailings, that is going to be towards the end of this month, 29th, I think, and 30th of July. So for anyone who wants to get some more information, head to the website for this conference. I think it was IMM, the Australian Institute for
ASM, yeah.
IMM, yeah, Mining and Minerals. Their website actually has the details. And then my final question for you, Chris, is something I ask every one of my guests in this podcast. That is your highlight. What do you think the highlight of your many, many years of career has been, and why do you think that was your highlight?
That's a good question. I did, there's a couple projects that were really sort of the highlight of my career. I did a closure up in Idaho at the Stibnite mine, and that was hugely rewarding. I guess just being able to put things back to where they needed to be. It had pretty significant impacts on the Snake River, and we were able to come in for an oil company that was the responsible party and put together a really economic closure. We had an orphan site that I worked on at the Elizabeth mine in Vermont, and the EPA was responsible for it. There was no ownership identified. I swore it never worked for the EPA, and I worked on that site for about 8 years, and it was the relationships that I had with our offices and with the EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers have lasted a lifetime. Actually, the senior guy that led it for the EPA just passed away here from pancreatic cancer, but he was a good friend and just a good people. And really the big one was Freeport giving me the opportunity to work with and develop their tailings stewardship program. That really kind of was something that I enjoyed. It was right in my wheelhouse, and it really led me down this path of not only the development of the engineer of record, but it's affected my entire career, and I'm very thankful for that opportunity. Life is, and the business is sort of that way. You kind of move along, and then you have sort of these big peaks that you kind of go through, and then it flattens out. But those peaks, when they come, they're really special. They might be a really difficult project, or you're dealing with a difficult problem. They may not be all that great, but they really kind of fill you out. And just to prop up our short course at Mine Waste and Tailing, we're doing a short course on terms of reference for the engineer of record. So it's pre-negotiating the relationship with the owner, between the owner and the engineer of record, and we put together guidance through USSD and CDA, and we've got a guidance document that's out there. It's still draft, but it's a very powerful document. Talks about how those relationships work, and you can kind of go through dim sum and kind of pick and choose how you would want to build that relationship out. And so we're going to go through that process in the short course and kind of talk about what's important, what isn't, for different scenarios. And everybody can choose their path, but it's how do you develop that prenuptial agreement?
Great. No, that's excellent. Very good. No, I think that's what we have time for today, Chris. Thanks again for your time, joining myself and the audience of this podcast today. And we catch up with everyone in our next episode. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks.